All right, the webinar has started and is recording.
Here. Got it. Hello. Welcome to tonight's Police Commission meeting. I want to thank you for your attendance. It's greatly appreciated. Our participation in these meetings each month is very important. And the why is because we represent many people in the community and we are accountable to them. That is our why. So I want to thank all the folks who are in attendance, and there are a few commissioners who will not be here. And I just want to make sure that when we have a month meeting, let's try our best to make sure that that's one meeting that we do not miss. And that's all I want to say about that matter. Right off the bat, I want to take an opportunity to review the agenda. Everyone should have a packet. And if there's any public comment, raise your hand on the internet and we will address you after a while. On the agenda, or excuse me, has everyone gotten a chance to see the agenda? Is everybody good with it? Okay. One of the things that I like to do is just briefly talk about the high points of what the previous meeting was. So from the previous meeting recap, I want to make sure we're all on the same page. It has been a while since our last, over a month, is we had a chief's report by Captain Sean Adams. Also, we went over the police auditor annual report with Leah Pitcher. She's the interim police auditor. And another highlight from last meeting was the Office of Professional Standards had an annual report, and that was done by Cindy Coleman. So we got a lot of good information from last meeting. You can always go back to your notes, but I always like to recap in this type of brief manner where we were 2 months ago, so as we push forward now. Jeremy, where are we at as far as public comments?
Dallas, there are currently no hands raised.
Okay.
No comment.
Okay, I will then go into our liaison reports, and right off the bat, I will start with Dr. Michael Haynes Garcia from a report from CRB. You are muted.
Hi, just for that. You always start with me and I'm never ready. Because at the beginning of the meeting, I realized that I could do this AirPlay thing and actually have everything much bigger on the TV here. And I was in the middle of doing that and had none of my windows correct when you called on me. So the CRB, it's also been a while since we've met. Yeah, come back to me in like a minute and I will let you know what our last meeting was. But essentially, we have some new members. Among the people who cycled off were Lindsay, who many of the people on this commission know. But we're excited about the new members as well.
Thank you very much. Councilor Ye. And just so we're on the same page, on when you see liaison reports, I will always have the two counselors as well as CRB begin. So you just have to go first.
Thanks for the heads up, Dallas. Let's see, I'm trying to think. The most closely aligned with the police commission that we're working on is our ad hoc committee, obviously, that you guys are aware of, and but we are in a information gathering phase, and I'm sure Alan will have something to say about it as well. So I don't think that I have anything tangible to report at this time, except for that our 3 city council employees, our municipal judge, the city manager, and police auditor are working on organizing the information and bringing us back more detail. And then the council will be moving on from there, and we'll have a lot better sense of hopefully hopefully by then, of how the police commission will fit into this process.
Thank
And
you.
Alan might have something to add. Alan and I are both going to be involved in that. So
Thank you very much. Councilor Zelinka.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add to that benefit of going second behind Councilor Ye. I was just looking on the tentative working agenda if it was scheduled yet to come back. And I'm not seeing it as of yet. So yeah, so that's the three folks are still working on pulling that together and using this a sounding board to help them do their work. So I think they'll be coming back this fall with some, at least some, we asked them to come back with a framework of how they're going to pull this together. And then they'll come back with it pulled together.
Thank you. I'm gonna come back to you, Dr. Garcia. Is there anything you want to add? You said come back to you, or is there anything you wanted to add?
No, actually, that was all. Essentially, what we were looking at in our last meeting was we were doing some incident reviews. There wasn't anything major. So,
Okay. Councilor Mogart, your hand's up. Did you have a question?
I do. Can you tell us who are the staff people who are working on pulling that information together?
And who is that directed to?
for the ad hoc committee?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah, so it's just our 3 council employees. So our police auditor, the municipal judge, and this city manager are working on it as a team. I don't think, I mean, Alan might know, but I don't know that they've involved staff.
Yeah, I don't think, except for maybe coordination, but of meetings. I think they've been trying to figure out what the framework looks like in the meetings of the 3 of them. So
There's
yeah, and by the way,
have any names?
so they're the ones that are going to be pulling this together.
So
Absolutely.
I'll check in with the city manager and make sure that that's accurate, and I can send that out to everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like
they're
those.
the council.
Thank you. All right, next on our agenda, I'm gonna turn this over to Jeremy. We're gonna discuss the complaint process review.
Well, hello and thank you. So we had an interesting occurrence in the past month, and that was regarding a Ricky Miller who had sent letters out to 7 of the commissioners and then myself. And it was done so in the form of a complaint. And then comes the process. What is the process? What are we supposed to do in an event like that? Well, the city code actually speaks to this a little bit when it says City Code 2.368, Section 4F. The members of the Civilian Review Board, or the member of the Civilian Review Board, in this case, Commissioner James Garcia, shall assist in redirecting any complaints received about the employee's conduct to the auditor's office and reporting on issues raised during the course of the Civilian Review Board's work pertaining to police policy and practices. So in this case, I worked with our CRB liaison. Thank you, by the way, for filling that role. And we made sure that communication, I took the copy of the letter that was sent to me specifically, and we went ahead and forwarded that to the auditor's office is the process. And then Leah made contact from there. I realize I've got Leah in the audience. I am going to promote her to a panelist just in case she has anything to add. But say a complaint comes to the table, that is Dallas would be as chair, the one that would direct that conversation over to our liaison to explain the correct process. So many of us are new, and Leah, please feel free to jump in there, or sorry, this is a thing that we are regularly having new commissioners. So it's something that we revisit, it seems like probably once a year. In this case, it's kind of, we're lucky because we should be set with most of the same commissioners for the next 3 years, but it's still an important conversation to have. Leah, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really. Thank you for looping me in. Just the ordinance makes our office the official intake sort of funnel for all complaints about EPD employees. So whenever you get anything like that, just exactly what Jeremy just said. And if you ever have questions about how that's going, feel free to contact me. I am always available and I can answer questions about where we are in that process. If you have any. So that's all I have, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Dallas. Unless
Does
there are any other
anybody-
questions.
Is there any other questions pertaining to the complaint process? If not, we will move on to commissioner comments. But before I start the commissioner comments, I want to make sure that what this chair is looking for, as well as whatever you're planning on having as a comment, what this chair is looking for is, what are those things that you have done in the past month as a commissioner that we should be enlightened about, or where you have gained some form of knowledge, or you have visited some form of organization that we can get to the meat and potatoes of many of the issues that are going on in the community. Because right now, of any moment in time, it's critical that not only the people know who we are, but they need to have a feeling that they can come to us with concerns they might have, and that we're a listening ear to them. So I'm gonna begin with you. Having said that, Commissioner Dominguez.
Can you hear me?
You're first. Commissioner comments.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you well.
Oh, I didn't realize I was not muted. Okay, sorry. Well, what have I done? Well, nothing really, not this past month. I thought we were on vacation, so apologies.
No.
But I do know that I have a report that I am supposed to give you that I will be writing for you. I recorded myself. I guess that I did do that. I did record myself kind of talking through what I had discussed with you last time when I had visited the one of the sweeps. So I will be reporting on that next week. And not next week. Well, yeah, actually, hopefully next week I'll have that report to you, and then you will be able to see what I did. So I have all my notes, just not in written format. That's all.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate that. Thank you. Looking forward to it.
Yep.
Vice Chair Mogart.
Again with the mute. So specifically regarding the police commission, nothing really to report. I've been seriously busy with my own work life and on several other committees that I sit on. As you all know, that I'm active in the community. So we also have taken a break at LULAC for the past month. It was a good time for everybody to kind of settle down and have a little bit of time to rest. But we'll actually be meeting again here shortly. And at that point, I am running for chair or president of the LULAC council. So fingers crossed, hopefully I'll get that. And the local LULAC council chapter will have a new president by next month. So that's it.
Thank you, and good luck on your race.
Thank you.
Yes, next we have Commissioner Winbrock.
Hey everyone, great to see you. Wish we were meeting in person. Looking forward to when we can meet in person. For me, it would be my first time. Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to share, but I just wanted to kind of open up to the group that the organization I work with. It's a nonprofit that also serves as the neighborhood association for the Whitaker. The Whitaker Community Council is hosting ongoing community wellness clinics where we offer STI testing, blood pressure testing, free food, as well as COVID-19 vaccines and COVID-19 testing. So we offer it twice a month. We do a partnership with Lake County Public Health and Oregon Health Authority. So I'll just continue to pass on information to Jeremy about the clinics. It's second Sunday and last Friday. Although we probably know loads of folks in our community who are fully vaccinated, there's quite a bit of folks who are partially vaccinated or completely unvaccinated, and our hospitals are at capacity. The National Guard's deployed at all of our hospitals in Lake County. And now we have the unfortunate moment of needing to have mobile morgues because our morgues are at capacity too. So just if you can chat with folks with your police commissioner hat on and just talk about the importance of getting vaccinated. The vaccines have been proven to be safe and effective. I've also heard from community members their interest in advocating to council to move quicker for the recommendations from the ad hoc police policy committee. There was a couple of community members yesterday that are working in a coalition in Eugene and Springfield. So they'll probably reach out to y'all about that in the coming weeks. And then I'm working with Chair Boggs, Jeremy, and the policy sergeant on a proposal for review by the commission that would update our police policy manual with gender inclusive and gender diverse language. So I shared this proposal with the commission before our planning retreat. And after speaking with the chair, I followed up with Jeremy to find a way to bring the proposal to the commission that doesn't necessitate us to be able to update the hundreds of instances of non-gender inclusive language policy by policy, which honestly could take years or even a decade because there's more than 50 policies to review and our yearly priorities fluctuate. So I'm hoping that once Jeremy has had a chance to review, and it may take weeks or months, I can work with the chair to find an appropriate meeting to bring this forward to the commission for a discussion as well as a potential vote. So that's all I have.
And one of the things I want to add to it, you know, Commissioner Winbrock and I talked at length, maybe 20 or 30 minutes on one of the days this past week, not just about this, about many things as far as what we can do. But the main thing that he got, hopefully from me, is that when we have a lot of things that we know that are important, let's get it done. Activity, work, action. I'm not into the record spinning and spinning and spinning. You have a great idea, let's react, let's do it. And I appreciate the work that you're doing, Commissioner Winbrock, and keep up the great efforts. Next, because we have a few commissioners who are not here today, we have our chief's report where he'll be discussing some current events. Chief Skinner.
Welcome to everyone. Oh, okay. I got a bad feedback here. Sorry, I'm in transit. I'm on my way back from a meeting from Salem, so I'm pulled over on the side of the road so we can have this conversation. It's good seeing everybody. We'll get a chance to chat a little bit further down the agenda when we go over some of the implementation checklist, and I'll talk a little bit about that. A couple of things from Chief's report that I want to make sure that you guys know. Sergeant Nelson is no longer going to be a part of the police commission in supporting the police commission. I've moved him full-time to internal affairs and professional standards. We need his expertise there, solely focused on that. We had a vacancy there. Jason Barrett, who was there, moved on to be a violent crime sergeant. So I needed to fill that vacancy. And Ryan has a great, not only investigative skill, but great relationship with the auditor's office and works very, very closely with a lot of our different work units. So he made the most sense to move there. So that's the bad news. The good news is, the good news is that Sergeant Julie Smith, who many of you may have known from the downtown team, has recently retired, and I hired her back in the chief's office to work with the police commission. So Julie Smith's going to be our new person to work with the commission. Julie is going to be working on a variety of things in that role as well. In addition to the commission work she's going to do, she's obviously got other policy oversight. She's going to be working on accreditation. We are up for reaccreditation this year. She'll be working on that. She's going to be working on some leadership stuff. She is going to be a big part of the 2021 legislative session and the mandates that came out of that legislative session, getting us up to speed on those. And she's going to be doing, as the ad hoc recommendations start filtering through for not only analysis, but implementation within the department, Julie's going to be helping to pay attention to make sure that that's going smoothly. So she's going to do a little bit of project managing around some of the ad hoc stuff. So I'm really excited about Julie. For those of you that don't know Julie, you're going to love not only her intelligence and creative thinking, but just her demeanor and just the fact that she gets what we're trying to accomplish. And she's just got such an amazing career of accomplishing great things in the downtown core, especially with some of our those that are suffering from mental illness in and around our homeless population. She was the kind of the genesis of community court and our court team, community outreach response team. So she's just a great person to have, and I'm super excited that I could grab her and bring her back as a limited duration employee, which quite frankly is going to be long-term duration for me. But she's going to be a great support for me in the office and for you guys as a commission. So super excited about that. The other thing that I would just maybe report out on that might be of the commission's interest is we are currently down 18 police officer positions in the police department. That's not good. And I think we have as many as 3 or 5 that are on COVID quarantine, and that's not good. We're really struggling just operationally to keep up. We weren't doing a great job keeping up to begin with, and now we're really at a critical state right now with the number of officers stepping away. Many of those have chosen to retire at their first opportunity. Some of those have chosen to be police officers in other states, and some have just chosen to do something completely different. And so while the early stages of 2020 and into 2021, I was feeling really good about the resiliency and the longevity of our department. Over the last 6 months, it's taken a significant turn for the worse, and we're really struggling with our staffing. So we've stood up a variety of recruitments happening right now. We've just finished the first recruitment, and those individuals are in background. And we've started a second recruitment, and I will report to the commission that I'm not pleased with what I'm seeing. Number one, we're not getting applicants in the volume that we were kind of pre-pandemic, and the quality of the applicants is significantly eroded, in my opinion, at least from this first pass. We took the first 100 that applied. We based on entry-level qualifications, just meeting entry-level quals, we took 34 to interview. In those interview panels, of which we had Amanda McCluskey was a part of that, which I think is important to note from HRC and former commissioner here. And then Priscilla Hasselman was also a part of that board. She is has originally from Mexico, just as part of some of the recommendations around some more community input. We ended up with 13 people that went to background. And through those backgrounds, I'm not sure we're going to get many, if any at all, out of that, because people just can't seem to tell the truth. And so we're having our first taste of those people in the applicant pool that are not the right people that should be in law enforcement. So we're not gonna lower our standards. We're not going to acquiesce just to fill the positions. I've told people it's not about getting a beating heart in that position. It's the type of heart in the individual that we want to put in those positions. And so this second recruitment is not looking any better. It's been open for 2 weeks now, and we've got maybe 40 applicants. we're just not getting people applying for this career. So that's going to be an ongoing challenge for us as we move forward, especially with our existing general fund positions and potentially community safety initiative, any of the new positions that we need to fill with community safety initiative. So letting the commission know that's a little bit of a challenge for us right now, but certainly we're committed to filling our positions and making sure that we get those filled with the right people. The outcome of that is you've got, especially your patrol force, is there's not a day that goes by that we don't have to draft people to work. Police officers are tired. They're exhausted. On top of that, we've got University of Oregon games that we have to staff, and it takes about 60 to be able to do that every other Saturday, and we have to draft and force people to work those games. We got school starting tomorrow for 4J. That's going to be another burden. So just know that your police department that you are so important in informing on around the policy stuff is struggling and tired, and if you pay attention to 21st century policing, one of those pillars is officer wellness. We want to pay attention to that because we know we make better decisions. We have more compassion, more empathy when we're not just completely exhausted out in the field. So with that, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to you, Chair Boggs, and we'll chat again a little bit later on in the agenda.
Yes, we have a couple of hands raised. So I'm gonna start off with Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, thanks for your report, Chief. Great to see you tonight. Yeah, starting with Julie, she's fantastic. For anyone who hasn't had a chance to meet her, she has such respect of the folks in the downtown beat where she served for, I don't know, multiple decades, including members of our unhoused community who know her by name, who she knows by name. I mean, she taught me a lot about what community policing looks like in Eugene and why it's so hard to do and why not every officer is the right fit to do it. So I learned a ton from Julie, and I'm, thrilled and also not surprised that you were able to bring her back. So that's a tremendous asset for the commission. And, while I'm, saddened by the transition, I understand that, staffing is short right now. So you're using your best people to fill positions that are in need. And yeah, it's a tough time to hire across the board, not just in policing, but in a lot of public sector positions and healthcare positions too. People are pretty frustrated and they're leaving their professions altogether. I don't know. I mean, there's not a whole lot that I don't think I could say. The president today announced vaccine mandates that may impact 100 million Americans. And so that might be something that the city would explore to be able to reduce the number of officers or the likelihood that officers might get sick and city employees might get sick. But then again, you may risk alienating a percentage of your workforce as well, given the mandate. So yeah, there's another set of problems that would come with that. But I just wanted to say thanks. It sounds like Julie's going to come on board, and yeah, really excited to work with her on the commission, and really appreciate the fact that she's coming back, and yeah, super thrilled for her insights for the coming workflow, and really excited to learn more about the set of policies and bills that you outlined later on in the agenda.
Yeah, her first day is going to be September 13th for the commission's information.
Commissioner Bogart.
Yeah, my question was how high a rank did Julie get?
She retired as a sergeant, and she was in the downtown team for most of that time. She came back to patrol for a little while before she retired. So she retired as a sergeant, and the person that vacated that policy position was a sergeant. Remember, Kyle Williams was a sergeant,
right?
Ryan's a sergeant. So I hired her back as a sergeant and stuck her back in there. And so she's excited. She gets to retire and she gets to work. So
she's great. I was smiling because I think she's a wonderful fit, and I think she's going to be a great fit, and I'm really grateful and glad that you brought her back in. I'm sorry that she was trying to get out, but you brought her back in.
She also has, I got to brag about her for a second because she was my sergeant before she retired. And one of her biggest things about staying at that sergeant rank was because she could touch as many officers as she could to try and like teach them her ways. And I'm super excited to have her back, so I could brag about her all day. But
Yeah,
that's why
she's awesome.
sergeant rank. So
Commissioner Dominguez. You had your hand up.
Oh, yes, thank you. I was just wondering, how much time, like, what are the resources and why, are police officers having to work for the University of Oregon?
So, Bonnie, we have a contract to safely run the University of Oregon home football games. And so every other Saturday when they have a home game, I have as many as 55 or 60 officers that are not only making sure traffic gets in and out of there, but provides for safety and security in the stadium. And along with University of Oregon police are also there. And because of some shortages, there's a few Springfield and some Lane County, but we're the biggest number of officers that provide safety for that stadium. That holds up to 54,000 now. So, and that's a contract with them where they pay for that overtime, and officers by seniority can sign up for that overtime. But if we're short of officers signing up, we have to draft to meet our contractual needs. So that means we force people to come in and work the game.
How long is that contract?
Well, it's every year. It happens, and it kind of renews every year based on the needs and the number of home games. So it's we kind of revisit it every year, and we revisit kind of the numbers that we think we need every year to be able to pull it off. Interestingly enough, the majority of the officers that we need for that are outside of the stadium just for traffic, just to get people in safely and get roads shut down and people doing what they're supposed to be doing, and then get them out of there and home safely.
When was it last revisited, that contract?
I'm sorry, say that again.
When was the last time that the contract was revisited? The contract, when was it revisited last?
Oh, it's every year.
Well, it's every year before the season starts.
Before the season starts, so when was that?
Bonnie, I don't know. It was probably sometime this last spring or summer when we decided that they were going to actually have fans in the stands, or felt like they were going to have fans in the stands, that they initiated a renewal contract with us.
So this is summer, so this is kind of when they were thinking that COVID was kind of going down, but things aren't looking so good with Delta. I don't know I wonder if they're still going to do that. And also if they would understand, it's just like things are changing. We have Delta that's going on. Is there any way to revisit that contract? Because it seems kind of like the way that we were talking about it, it's just like officers are having to be recruited and they're already exhausted. And I kind of feel like it's kind of wasteful to be forcing them to be doing something for the University of Oregon that's based off of entertainment when they have so many other things to be working on. So I just think it's kind of like a weird use of resources. And I'm wondering, like, why? Is it like some kind of monetary thing, or just like EPD's making money off of it, which obviously you need the budget for it. I'm just wondering if that's like, it seems kind of weird to be doing that right now. If you have people that are, you've got, was it 5 officers that are in quarantine, and then people leaving. So people are exhausted. So it seems kind of like, if officers are exhausted and we're not taking that into account, how are we going to recruit people if we're forcing them to do things that seem just kind of frivolous, I'd say. So.
Well, I appreciate your sentiment. I think there's probably a variety of different opinions on whether they think it's frivolous or not, when those home games generate about $80 million a year for the athletic department.
Right, but that's not, and I guess what I'm getting at is there are security companies, and I just feel like we have our officers and need to protect our city, and the U of O is like a separate entity, and I just don't think that, I feel like they could find other people, and I just think that that's kind of weird for the officers.
Yeah, and the challenge we have is the majority of our footprint is the city streets, which we do have authority over. That's not, private security is not they don't have the authority to shut traffic down to do the things that we do outside of the stadium. So, it's that horse is out of the barn for this year. I mean, we could have, we didn't know what was going to happen with the pandemic, but the way the governor has set up the restrictions, it allows for in-person outdoor events. They are demanding it's all vaccinated or negative COVID test to get into the stadium, to include my officers. So that are in the stadium. So there are some precautions that are there. Having said that, you can imagine that nothing is perfect. So, but I appreciate your comments around staying focused on the things that we need to be doing. This is just one of those things that every year is been so important to this community that it's just ongoing, essentially.
Now, I want to add as chair, and that's a great question, Commissioner, to me. It's a great question. But one of the things I want to make sure, when I say I want to make sure how we get it done, there's not too much he could necessarily do on the year contract, but with the passion that I'm seeing, what you're saying about looking out for the police officers, that's where we step up and see if you or I could find any other options. So there is a plan B or plan C. It sounds like I'm not hearing anything about a plan B, at least as far as this entity could do the job. So if we did the research and found that out, at least that's something we could bring to the table. But your question is great. Who had their hand up next? I believe it was Commissioner Winbrock.
It was actually Commissioner Haynes Garcia. I was just going to echo the point stated by the chief that the university accrued a $75 million budget deficit from not having sports events last year. Not that I agree with the athletics program. I just wanted to kind of, state the obvious that the university, because of the guidance from the governor, in all likelihood would not shut down sports events unless there was another directive from the governor. So that's all I wanted to share.
I have Commissioner Ye. Excuse me, Councilor Ye.
I think I was next.
I think Michael beat me.
Yeah.
Michael beat you? Okay, Dr. Garcia, go ahead.
This is not what I was going to comment on, but I would just like to point out that the University of Oregon is a state agency, and it's just strikes me as odd that a state agency is kind of holding a city hostage for services when I don't see why Oregon State Police couldn't be pitching in here. But I don't understand how all of these things work. What I was just gonna say was that I'm wondering. So I'm very appreciative that Chief, that you have stated that you're not going to compromise on quality, and I can't imagine how frustrating it must be to have so many people in that pool not making it through the vetting process. And I'm wondering if what can be done, because I know a lot of the conversations of the last year and a half have been about both rethinking how police can do what they do, but also rethinking about who can do what some of the things that police are being asked to do. And I know, like, in academia, this has happened over the course of many years, that as budgets have slimmed, staffing has decreased, and a lot of the things that professors didn't used to do, we now have to do, and they're not necessarily the things that we are trained for, and they're not necessarily the things we want to do, but we have to do them simply because there isn't enough other people to do them. And I imagine that has also happened in policing. I'm wondering, what are there functions that could be offloaded onto non-police that would then reduce the workload for police officers?
Yeah, I think that in some instances we have a couple of really good examples of that. I mean, Cahoots is kind of a prime example of offloading work that in many other jurisdictions, police officers go into all those calls in our situation, we have a gap where we don't have the ability to go to all those calls. So we wouldn't even dispatch, but we know that we have a need. And so Cahoots fills that gap, which is a good example of that. The other great example of that is our CSO program, where you have non-sworn individuals that are responding to cold calls and or calls that don't have a safety component to it, to allow for some level of service to be given to this community. And so as we move forward and not only thinking about what police reform looks like, but also what kind of the community safety initiative might look like, I'll be looking at every opportunity to start offloading the work onto the right resource that matches the need. That's kind of my mantra right now. Match the resource with the need. And for years, what we said was the only resource we had for any need was police. And what I'm telling you, and my commitment is I want to get police back doing what police officers should be doing, which is responding to those high-level, high-priority life safety, property safety, crimes in progress calls, and get other types of resources responding to other community needs around livability issues and lower-level societal issues and crime. So, yes, it's kind of a long-winded way of saying yes. I'm right there with you, and I think over the next couple of years, you'll see us make a significant shift towards that model.
Have you seen similar difficulties in recruiting for those kinds of, like for CSOs, for example?
Here's the fundamental thing that's different, or I should say, here's the fundamental thing that's the same, is you still have to pass a background. You still have to not have a criminal record, and you still have to not lie when you're talking about what's going on. You know what's so interesting about this last group in the background is that there was at least 2 or 3 candidates that we thought were going to be really good candidates for police officers, and they lied about things in their background. And if they would have just told the truth, there's a ton of forgiveness and a ton of recovery that can happen in this career. But the fact that you don't have the integrity to tell the truth in a background, it's basically it's a death sentence from an employment standpoint. So whether you're a CSO, whether you're a record specialist, a dispatcher, or a police officer, we have high standards around veracity and telling the truth in the backgrounds.
Councilor Ye.
Thanks. So I wanted to thank Bonnie for her questions. I have some, Autzen is in my ward. And so I think a lot about the football games, especially when I have to listen to them from my house. But I wanted to bring in another perspective, and that's that the police officers that are handling traffic control are not just doing that service for the folks that are going to the games. They're also doing it for the neighborhoods that have to deal with what's going on around them. It's very disruptive to the neighborhoods and to the people that are trying to use those streets for non-football purposes, and having those officers out there creating a little extra safety and a little less chaos is very appreciated by the folks who live in the neighborhoods. I think some of your points are really great about balancing the stress we're putting on our officers with essentially an entertainment. I think those are really great points and things we should really consider as we're going into contract negotiations. But I did want to point out that there are benefits that go beyond just the people that are at the stadium. The games are probably going to happen whether we like it or not, right? So we have to deal with them being here in our community.
That's a really good point. Thanks.
All right, thank you. So I want to move on our agenda. One of the things that I said that I would make sure that we address are the things that we as a commission bring up, and then we find ways to value the information that you gave. That's why I love your information. And then we have to react to do it. So an example of our next presentation, and I'll recognize the commissioner for doing it, as you will see now. So based on the information given in our last few meetings from when it was dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion from the vice chair Commissioner Mogart, based off of we need to bring some of this to the table. We have, speaking on that topic, will be Fabio Andrade, if I'm saying that correct. Fabio, did I say it correctly?
Yes, in Brazil we say Andrade. There's a sh sound.
Andrade.
But here most people say Andrade, and that's fine.
Okay, and he is the city manager's AIC. And before someone asks what the AIC means, it means acting in capacity. And he's with human rights and neighborhood involvement. So I'll let him speak on the topic, and you may begin, sir.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for the work you do for the commission and for the community. My name is Fabio Andrade, and I work in the Office of Human Rights and Neighborhood Involvement as an equity and human rights analyst. And right now I'm also managing the office as under an acting capacity assignment. I'm going to present you some highlights from our latest annual report, which is a partnership between our office, HRNI, and Eugene Police, and also answer some questions about our program, how we try to increase awareness, how we support victims who have reported such cases to Eugene Police and to our office. Just 1 second while I share my screen. Sorry, just 1 minute. Are you able to see the screen, the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. So this is some statistics from the, I'm just going to present some statistics from the latest report, our 2020 Hate and Bias report. First, a definition of what a hate crime is, and here is a simple definition. It is used by the FBI, by the state of Oregon, and also in our website to help people understand what is a hate crime. So it's a crime in the first place, but it's a crime that has been motivated by bias. And the definitions vary depending on the jurisdictions. So when people see data reported by the FBI, by Eugene Police to the FBI, in data that we report in our annual reports, they do not match. And the reason is that we have different jurisdictions and different definitions of what kind of bias would give rise to a bias crime or a hate crime. So here we have them listed, some of those protected in federal law. And then in our local reporting, we add some categories that have been protected under state of Oregon legislation and also by city council when they add some protections in our city code, such as the case of housing status, which was added to the year. This is a representation of the program we have in place to collect data. First, to receive reporting from individuals and organizations of bias crimes and bias incidents. Bias crimes are usually reported to Eugene Police. A few cases are reported to us, and we assist the victims in reporting to Eugene Police. Bias incidents are usually reported to HRNI directly, or they are referred to us by Eugene Police when someone reports an incident as if it were a crime to Eugene Police, and it is later deemed not to be a criminal case. Capture those in our incident report. We do the tracking of all the cases that are collected by both agencies and annual report. And the final phase of our program is supporting victims. So we provide information and refer to some agencies, and we also we also report data to official agencies. So mostly Eugene is now reporting to the state of Oregon and also to the FBI. One note regarding the FBI data, if you've seen the article in the Register Guard today, is that Eugene used to be responsible for almost half of all the hate crimes reported in Oregon. And although our numbers increased in the past year, we are reporting now just 15%. What it means is that with the new the change in state law, now we have more agencies reporting. And the number of cases from all other cities in the state has increased. So we see our participation in the total diminishing. It doesn't mean we are reporting less. We are doing exactly the same work. It's just that other people are now also reporting their cases. Here you can see how hate crimes have changed over the year, the number of cases per year since 2013. So most years just below or around 50 cases per year, except in 2017 when we have a spike that has been attributed to the political climate of that year, more cases being committed, also more people feeling encouraged to report such cases. This chart just shows the type of cases that have been reported to Eugene police, mostly intimidation, followed by assault and vandalism. Almost half of the, or a little bit over half of the cases that we received are related to race. And that's a trend that has been confirmed in state level reporting and also by the FBI data. In the case of the FBI data, the most recent one is actually 68% of the cases were related to race. So in our latest report in Eugene, we are a little bit under that level of participation of race-based cases in our total reporting. Here you can see the different communities that have been affected the most by hate crimes. And it is striking that out of the 29 cases, for example, based on race, the absolute majority of those cases were targeting the African-American community. And when we consider that that community represents under 2% of the total population, the likelihood of an African-American experiencing a hate crime in our city is much, much higher than when you compare to any other group, any other marginalized group. And the number here is for the total number of hate crimes in the past year. So out of the 54 cases, 26 targeted Blacks and African-Americans. The number of cases targeting the Jewish community and the Latino community have actually declined in the past years. The reported cases. That doesn't mean the cases are not happening. It's just that our reporting is indicating that we are receiving fewer reports per year targeting those communities. In this chart, you can see just the representation of marginalized communities in the cases involving physical violence. And again, the African-American community is the most affected one. Out of the 15 cases, 7 of them were targeting African-Americans. This map shows the distribution of cases. It's an approximation. Year after year, we see this trend being confirmed. Most cases happening in the central neighborhoods around downtown and some concentrations around high schools. This is the historic series for the non-criminal incidents. And here we see more variation than in the criminal ones. So for example, we have a decline, we experienced a decline in the past 2 reports, in the previous 2 reports, 2018 and 2019. And then we saw this increase in 2020. Many of those cases involved cases that could be classified as freedom of speech, but they usually had something else connected to them that led us to classify those cases as a bias incident or an incident of discrimination. And the majority of those cases were related to housing.
Mr. Andretti, Fabio, Mr. Andretti?
Yes.
We have a couple of questions. I don't want to go too far in your report. Dr. Garcia, can you start off? You have a question, hand rise.
Oh, sure. I think Silver was first.
Go ahead, Silver.
Thank you. So are all these cases self-reported, or are there numbers coming in from other resources as well that are not self-reported?
Most cases are self-reported. Eugene police can add a bias tags to some cases. So we have cases in which they were not reported as a bias crime initially, but through the investigation, the detectives and officers would see indication that there was a bias motivation for the crime, and then they can add that tag as well.
And I know this personally, but can you answer, by and large, are most hate and bias crimes reported?
We do not know for sure the percentage of cases that are not reported. We do have some statistics from federal surveys. So the Crime Victimization Survey, the latest one I had is from 2017, and they were affirming that just under 50% of the cases are reported.
Thank you.
Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to know real quick, does the city classify anti-Hispanic and Latino bias as a racial bias or as ethnic bias?
Ethnicity.
Thank you.
And I have one question. In that number where you had a high number where it said Black African Americans, my question is, when you said the mix, there was a column that said mixed race. Is that African American too?
That can include people of mixed race, that is mix of African American and any other. Yes.
If they're mixed with African American, they're African American.
We go by how people identify. So the information that people provide sometimes is just they identify as mixed race, and we do not have that what is in their mix to help us separate into different groups.
Thank you. You can proceed.
Thank you. Here is just a distribution of the non-criminal incidents by motivation. And in this one, we can show primary and secondary categories, because sometimes there is more than one bias motivator for a case. But again, race is the dominant case throughout the data we have received over the years. This is the distribution by marginalized groups that have been, in all groups, in fact, that have been targeted by bias incidents. Again, African Americans are the most affected community members for criminal and non-criminal incidents. You can see here, we do collect reports based on race for all groups. That's why we may have some cases involving white or Caucasian people. So bias crimes is not just about marginalized communities, is about any community that has been affected because of their identity. But as you can see in the data, it's a very small number of white people being affected by this kind of incident. And finally, the distribution of non-criminal incidents. And here we can see a higher concentration in downtown. And that's because a lot of the incidents have to do with housing, and we have more concentration of apartment housing in some areas of the city, and also discrimination in place of accommodation. For those who want to read the entire report, it's available in our website. We have reports since 2012, and we also have more information about how we categorize the cases and how people can report incidents to Eugene Police and to HRNI. And that's our main goal, is to increase awareness of the reporting channel so we can reduce that number of cases that are happening and not being reported in our community. And with that, I can answer your questions.
Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, thank you so much, Fabio. My cat and a squirrel are facing off, so there's a very intense drama happening right outside on my patio, so I might have to close the door really quick. to stop that from getting into the meeting. Just a little insight into what happens when you don't meet in person. I really appreciated the granularity of your reporting methodology. And I was also, relieved to see that we're now tracking housing status as a protected category and as a motivation for bias crime through future reports. I have a couple of questions, but I guess the first one I have is that I'd like to, is a comment first and then a question after it, is that I'd love to be able to see additional kind of trend analysis in future reports. You know, you kind of alluded to in the beginning with that we're no longer a really large percentage of hate and bias crimes relative in the state of Oregon, but that's not because of any interventions. It's because there's greater reporting and compliance with state mandates across the state. And it's not a critique of the hate and bias report per se, but it's something that I think that all City of Eugene reports, at least that I've seen through the commission, can improve upon, including the police auditor annual report and the Office of Professional Standards annual report, because they usually show maybe like 3 years of data. And this one was great because it showed maybe 5 or 6 years. And so what I mean by trend analysis is like using large data sets to find causal relationships between data. And like one example I was thinking of is like neighborhoods and incidents of non-criminal hate and bias crimes. Right? And you have that really cool heat map that showcases that the density or number of cases, hate and bias cases reported per capita. And I'm not suggesting that the city uses a specific technique like linear regression or something like that, but I think that future reports could have more detailed analysis, like research questions that maybe can spark discussion based on that historic data that goes back to 2012 to better inform decisions or resource allocation, to be able to maybe predict them a little bit better and preempt them, and really focusing on communities that they've occurred the most. And kind of one example that I was thinking about as I was kind of reading this report and the reports from 2012 is that, to me, it did seem like certain high schools have higher instances of criminal and non-criminal reported hate and bias crimes, but certain high schools didn't. And so then when I was looking through the publicly available hate and bias crime reports from 2012, 13, 14, and onward, it seemed like North Eugene, Willamette, Calapooya, and Churchill have higher instances of criminal and non-criminal reported hate and bias crimes versus a place like South Eugene. And I'm not really sure why this is. I was going into the greatschools.org data aggregator, and I was like looking into, things like diversity in the schools and how many kind of free and reduced lunch folks are there. But I mostly wanted to use it as a point for maybe you could be able to use these data sets to find correlations, because I think potential policy direction from council would be increasing resource allocation to do specific interventions, right, in the areas that show disproportionate hate and bias crimes, like schools specifically. And so one of the things I wanted to talk about later is the belonging training, which I really found super useful. I took it as a police commissioner, and I could see how maybe using the belonging training as an intervention in the areas that have higher instances of hate and bias crimes might actually lead to reducing the number of hate and bias crimes reported. So I just wanted to see if the city's interested, or if you've had any conversations about having more detailed analysis or trends in future reports that use historic data, not just showing, but maybe looking for some of those causal relationships for why hate and bias crimes exist in higher numbers per capita in certain areas of the city versus others.
Yes, it is possible to include some more correlation analysis to some of those neighborhoods. We have avoided reporting the data based on neighborhoods, and it has an impact on how people experience the neighborhoods, and also we do not provide details of where cases were located as to protect people's privacy and identities. So that's why we use the heat maps, but the data is available, and we can play with the data in different ways if there is specific interest.
Yeah, thanks, Fabio. I have another question or two, but I'd yield to Council Member Zelenka.
Councilor Zelenka.
Thanks, Fabio. Second time I've seen this report, it's always pretty fascinating. The question I have is related to how we compare and how we do the comparisons against other cities. in Oregon in particular. One year I was on the council, we had like, I think we had over 50 complaints, and Portland had a total of 5, which is ridiculous. They didn't have 5 complaints. They just reported 5 complaints. They're 6 times larger than we are. So there's a lot going on there. And you know, and the Register Guard said that I remember the headline or the subheadline was, Eugene is the hate crime capital of Oregon. Well, it wasn't true. We're not to say that hate crimes don't occur here, but it was related to how the programs were done and how we captured them. So there's 2 things that go on there for me. One is, now that there's a requirement that everybody do it, there's that kind of a minimum requirement, but how well you do that relates to how good of an effort you are trying to figure this out. And Eugene has always done a very good effort in trying to figure out how much hate crimes and where they're occurring, and doing reports like the one you just did. But when you care about that and you do a good job, your numbers go up and then you look worse in comparison. So, you know, the better you do, the worse you look in doing this, which is kind of odd. So I'm wondering how the new requirements play into that, what other communities are doing, how you guys think about that. You've analyzed this data in comparison to other cities and what we do. How do you think about that?
Thank you. First, just to affirm that it's a strong caution when you go to the FBI websites that do not use this data for rankings. There is a big box telling people not to do that. But year after year, we find different publications using the FBI data to organize rankings. And the reason they tell people not to do that is because it's not a mandatory reporting. So law enforcement agencies volunteer the hate and bias data. So some agencies will just not report the case. Now we have this requirement in the state of Oregon that law enforcement agencies in Oregon must report to the state, and the state is publishing their own annual reports. So when you look at that report, we can see how the participation of Eugene in the total number of cases declines. And if we look at complaints to the hotline, our participation is even smaller, because there are situations in which people are calling the state hotline and presenting a complaint, but the local law enforcement agency is not including that or investigating it or reporting it as a bias crime. So, but in both cases, we see that more cities are now complying with the state law, SB 577, and that is increasing the number of cases reported throughout the state.
Yeah, because I remember in the past, there were a lot of cities that just had 0, which we know isn't true. So in the new reporting requirements, do we see those zeros disappear, or are there still 1s and 0s all over the place? We have to report something because we can't put in a 0, so we put in a 1.
It has changed. It has changed. So when we look at the state reporting, for example, Lane County appears number 3 or 4, depending on the data set you are looking at. And we used to be the number 1. And the state is reporting at the county level, not at the city level. But we do know that most of the case reporting in Lane County is coming from Eugene.
Yeah. Okay. So it's getting better. Not perfect yet, but it's getting better.
All right. I'm going to move on to Councilor Ye.
Thank you. So Fabio, I have 2 questions. Thank you for being here, by the way, and I'm so glad that you're in your position. I appreciate you being willing to step up. My first question is on, so since we know that we're vastly underreported, I'm wondering how, because I'm not a data person as a profession, so I'm wondering how useful the data really is in general for us, making decisions based on it when we know how inaccurate it is. And my second question is, as the report relates to this committee, is there anything that we can take out of it that would help us as we're looking at policy that might directly affect some of these hate crimes specifically?
When I reviewed the Eugene policy on bias crimes, we did not see anything that was striking as something that needed to be changed or updated. The policy is pretty advanced in how officers will report the case, how they will talk to the victims. We had a few minor change just based in adaptation updates since we have new state law and a few terms that could be tweaked in terms of language, but not in procedures. The policy is pretty comprehensive. In my opinion, and the opinion of our team, when we look at that policy, which was presented to council recently by Chief Skinner, we really appreciate that it tells officers how they will interact with victims. And that is really important to have a trauma-informed approach to this kind of case.
Great. I wanted to make sure folks that were watching got to hear that. So also for my first question, like how useful is this data? Like when you know that 50% or more are not reported, how do you take that into consideration when you want to then be making decisions based on it?
It's hard for us to know how much is out there. So that statistic is a national survey from 2017. So we do not know how many cases are not being reported. The data is very useful when we look at the communities that are being affected and we compare their participation in our total population. So it can help us understand why some communities have the experience that they do not belong here, or that they start demanding that we show more leadership in supporting those communities because they are facing a harder time living here and being victimized multiple times since they are smaller in terms of numbers in the total population.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing.
Commissioner Winbrock.
Hey, Fabio. Yeah, thanks again for answering the questions. And my question dovetails on Councilor Ye's, specifically about the belonging training, because I think it is really impactful. And the fact that you've opened it up to community groups is something that I think is a tremendous resource for organizations and institutions here in the city of Eugene. And I wanted to see if there's ever been interest in doing some pre and post evaluation of bias through the belonging training. There's an instrument called the Harvard Implicit Association Test that's really easy. It's a peer-reviewed tool and it's a free test that might be able to show the impact of the training if you can get a representative sample of participants to complete it before and afterwards, and then maybe weeks or months after it. So I'm curious if y'all have ever explored kind of ways to evaluate the belonging training as a way to reduce implicit bias.
We do talk about implicit bias in our training. We do not place strong emphasis in it. We refer people to take the test and analyze how they score in those tests. The belonging training was initially designed for city staff, and the outcomes are all about helping people experience a sense of belonging in the organization and raising awareness of what can help the community members experience a sense of belonging when they interact with city staff. We adapted it a little bit to offer to neighborhood associations, boards, and commissions, and we are still delivering that adaptation. We have new sessions scheduled for the next month. We also have made the content available to partner agencies. So 4J, Bethel, Springfield, City of Springfield, the county, and some other agencies, they were invited to see the training. And if there was interest, to discuss with our leadership how to have that content available to their staff, if they wish to apply that model as well, as we are doing at the City of Eugene. Doing a pre and post test for bias is not something we consider for that training. And that was based on some research about bias training over the decades, and it has not shown really useful information in changing behavior.
Commissioner Mogart.
All right. Hold on, Bill. Yes, hello. The reason I wanted to make another comment was I worked with Calc and we did the hate and bias response. And, you know, the numbers can be skewed because there's a large portion of the community who doesn't want to make any kind of formal complaint. You know, they still live in the shadows, and so they don't feel up to the sort of security that they should feel to be able to come forward and make a complaint about what type of you know, hate and bias stuff had taken up had occurred to them. So that's one thing I wanted to make sure that we sort of understood. Do you still work with the back-to-back program and with Calc?
We do not work directly with that program. We do share information with all partner agencies and community groups, and we give them updates on what's happening in the program. We send announcements about the report, and we invite people to refer their clients to us whenever possible. There was an attempt to have better coordination with agencies, and that was held at Calc. We had several meetings, including one with the Eugene police detectives who investigate hate crimes, went there to get to know the leaders in some organizations, and that coalition disbanded last year. So we have not met since the start of the pandemic. There is interest in more coordination because different agencies, they have their networks and people trust them. And sometimes people will come to them with reports of bias crimes and bias incidents. Some agencies will connect those clients with us and some will not. But we are available and willing to engage with any community organization. We did have a meeting with Calc staff last few months ago when there were some complaints about we not reporting cases involving the Asian community. And there was a belief that perhaps the systems were not available to them or easy enough for them to report. And we made some change to the system, so that was helpful. We organized a listening session specifically for the Asian American community. And we have changed our website and our reporting forms. And as soon as we get guidance from the US Department of Justice regarding the new COVID-19 hate crimes law, we will work with Eugene Police to implement those recommendations. So there is interest for more collaboration with the community because we need those trusted networks that people have to channel them to us or for the community groups to report on their behalf. So our form lets our organizations such as Calc and any other organization to report case on behalf of their clients.
LULAC is the organization that I'm a part of, and you know, I'd like for us to have some more dialogue with the city and with Calc and with NAACP. So if that's something that we can do, I would appreciate that because we're not often, you know, considered or at the table, and we should be.
Dallas, you need to unmute, sir. Commissioner Boggs, I'm asking you to unmute.
Councilor Zelenka,
Thanks, sir.
your hand was up.
It's still up. I'm trying to work with Microsoft to have that go down and Zoom when you're done talking, your hand goes down, but nobody's bitten on that yet. So sorry about that.
I'm going to expect you to resolve that issue with that hand. Commissioner Dominguez. You're next.
Thank you. When did you say that you looked over the bias crime policy?
We had a work session. I can't remember the exact date. I believe it was in June. And we presented on the bias program and present on the policy for Eugene Police on bias crimes.
Okay, and you said that you made some edits with the chief, right? Or
No,
something?
we made comments for the presentation on some language that we changed. So we would present it in accordance with the terms we have been using in our report, and to make it easier for people to understand the policy, because we were trying to present the text in a PowerPoint format that had to be summarized and make it simpler for people to understand. But we can send some of those, I can share some of those comments in writing, what they were.
Okay, yeah, because I was just wondering, because I was looking at the policy and mine was printed quite a while ago. And I just looked on the website and I have a question about one of them. It said reports involving bias crimes will not be held. And I was wondering, do you know what that means? That was number 7 under officer responsibility. I didn't understand. It seems kind of like contrary to some of the other things. So
I don't have the policy open right now.
okay. But just it's
I
very
can speak to that real quick.
thank you.
You may or may not know, but we have as many as on average 163 calls for service that go unanswered or held every single day. And so that policy speaks directly to in the event we have a report or a hate or bias crime, that it doesn't get held, that it actually gets priority and it gets responded to.
Oh, thank you. That okay. Yeah, that's worded funny. All right, thanks. It makes it seem like it's not going to be addressed or something. I would just, like, if anybody were to read this, I'd say they might think, oh, it just, like, where does it go? Does it get let go? Maybe adding something to that, but we're not talking about policy right now, but maybe we should add that later, just to be clarify for any, like, people that are like me that are reading through it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Chair, I would like to add some information to the question from Commissioner Mogart.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned the situation with, for example, undocumented immigrants that would not feel comfortable reporting. And that is true. We have had cases that involve that community. And sometimes we hear about their case through community partners. There was one incident that was actually brought to court that involved someone who did not have documented status to work here, but still office works with that community, with those victims, and support them throughout the process. In Eugene, we cannot ask for citizenship status. We do not collect any information that can identify citizenship status from anyone. So we try to tell people that they can trust Eugene Police and they can trust city staff with that, but still, people have reasons to be afraid. We had a case in the past, early in the year, that the person actually called Eugene Police and the officer responded to the case and offered some options for support and for reporting, but the person wasn't comfortable going forward with the report because of immigration status. And in that case, we had a conversation. We did not document the case and we did not include as a criminal case. So there was no track, no record to be tracked for that case in the Eugene Police side, but we did include it in our bias incident reporting. But the person still got support from Eugene Police officers and from our office.
Yeah, I mean, we have our own personal system where we can have reports that go forward and people feel safe because we're trusted partners in the community. So we've dealt with this situation a number of times, but that doesn't change the way people feel about dealing with a public entity or a public agency, especially a police department or, the city. So if there could be some more education about that, that would be great. But I don't know what else there can be done beyond having an organization like LULAC, where we have the capacity to have people come to us and let us know when there's been something that's taken place. We don't do service. We're not a service-based organization. So we just can advocate and we can help direct. But it would be good to have a little bit more of a connection with the city and with those organizations that are, you know, in the service of doing these kind of different processes.
Yeah, the federal government will offer grants for jurisdictions who want to increase community outreach and education on bias crimes. And we are waiting on them to release the guidance following the passage of the new law and the grant application. So we do hope to engage some community organization in helping us in outreach and awareness campaign.
Next, let's see here. I have Navisha.
Okay, so yes, thank you, Chair. Just kind of my personal input on just stuff, and maybe a plug for a little bit of recruitment. But I know for me personally, I've gotten a lot of conversations from community members that are wanting to report. So they reach out to me as a law enforcement officer, and then I feel terrible when I'm like, well, it's not necessarily a crime, but here's where you can go. So even just having that diversity within our workplace contributes to that. I've seen it firsthand. I've seen it in other officers as well, where people are feeling comfortable, even if you are law enforcement, to disclose that information. Because quite frankly, a good chunk of us have experienced some form of bias or something to that effect. I'd argue that. So it is super helpful to have folks that are in uniform that also are from their communities. And so that's just my little plug for recruitment. But it is good also that we've received that training to make sure that we're referring folks to your office as well, and making sure that they are taking that route if there's something criminal that we just can't get to.
Okay, I believe we are at Commissioner Winbrock.
Thanks. I just have two quick questions. The first one I think is pretty easy. How can community organizations sign on to the city's letter expressing support for the efforts to combat hate and bias activity? It's on like the last page of the hate and bias report. And then also, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your partnerships with the organizers of the Oregon Track and Field Championships. In the looking ahead section, you talk about sports events. And did we see a spike in cases during the Olympic trials? You know, we had a tremendous amount of diversity, religious, ethnic, racial, national diversity during the Olympic trials. And I'm wondering if that was reflected, or if you're expecting an increase in hate and bias activity, both criminal and non-criminal, during the World Track and Field trials.
You're muted. Oh.
Sorry. For the first question, just an email from the organization expressing interest, and we will add them to the list. We try to recruit more organizations to be in that list. So if you are connected with any organization who would like to be there, please just let us know and we'll add it. From HRNI, we did not see an increase in case of discrimination during the events. I have not seen an update from Eugene Police because the Human Rights Commission has been on break. So the next update that we will receive is on September 21st. We do get a weekly report from cases that have been already logged, and have not seen an increase either based on that report that I received from the EPG weekly.
Commissioner Dominguez, did you have another question?
Not yet. I mean, I do, but I need to read something, but yes.
No problem, no problem, no problem. I saw your hand up and then it went down. I was just checking.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
So it looks like we don't have any other questions. If not, I would like to thank Fabio Andrade for your report. I believe we gained a lot of information that many of us might not have known. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thanks for the work you do. It's really important for the community.
Thank you. So next, we're going to be turning to Chief, he will be discussing what he's doing. And if many of you do not know, I will let you know. Chief Skinner is the Vice President of the OACP, Oregon Association of Chief of Police, where he's the Vice President. And if I could be wrong, but I've been told that he will be the President next. Is that correct?
For better or for worse, you are correct, sir.
All right. So my intel was good.
Your intel was excellent, as usual.
So would you like to share the checklist?
Yeah, I certainly would. First, as just a put an exclamation point on the work that HRNI is doing and Fabio is doing, in particular with his team. We appreciate that partnership, and we appreciate how they have helped us to better respond and actually have some dedicated resources in special investigations to really liaison with some of these groups that have experienced hate and bias. And so there's always room for improvement, but I like where we're at with respect to that relationship and response. And anecdotally, I would tell you, yes, we agree that those incidents are horribly underreported. So we know that to be true. What you have in your packet, and it's not going to ask for commissioner decisions tonight, but what I thought would be really important is to share with you kind of the laundry list from the Oregon Association Chiefs of Police and the Oregon State Sheriff's Association, the work that we're paying attention to and doing around the last two, mostly this last long legislative session, and some of the police reform and accountability House bills and Senate bills that have come out of that. And so as you look through this, there's not a ton of detail on the left-hand side of the column, because most of these bills are very lengthy, and you can certainly look them up and look at the kind of the intent and the content that's behind it. But what I wanted to get in front of the police commission is for them to notice that there is a variety of these things that will adjust policy. And one of the things that Julie Smith is going to be doing is she's going to be taking a look at each one of these with the implementation dates as established by the House bill or Senate bill, and start digging into our policy and seeing if we're compliant, and where in fact we're not compliant, starting to suggest policy language around some of these things. And so it seemed like a logical nexus to do that work within the chief's office and then get it in front of police commission for approval, input, recommendation as we look at some of the different dates for implementation. Some of those implementation dates were as soon as the governor signed them, and others it kicks it down the road into, in some cases, maybe as far out as January 1st of 2023. But we're going to start that heavy lifting to start getting legislatively in alignment legislatively with the House bills and Senate bills that were passed out of this last session. And so, we can talk about some of these individual ones if you want, knowing that we don't have a lot of deep content here. And I would have to go back and read some of these to refresh my memory. Some of these are that will be specific to Eugene Police Department. Some of these will be specific to the Department of Public Safety Standards and Training, which I'm also on the board. The governor has appointed me to that board, so I have some connectivity there to pay attention to how that's happening. They will be doing some things that will impact us. And then some of these others are more specific to a sheriff's office environment or a correctional environment that doesn't apply to Eugene. But I did want to give you kind of a laundry list of those things that our lawmakers have asked us to pay attention to, and more importantly, letting this commission know that there's going to be some of these that will come in front of you for approval, so that we can be in compliance. So with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions that you may have about this. Otherwise, more to come as far as getting things done around police reform and accountability.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that update. Commissioner Dominguez?
Yes, thank you. So for the part that, sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the fifth row down, it says adopt policy prohibiting an officer from intentionally obscuring required identification when on duty and assigned to crowd management duties. I remember Chief Skinner, that you had enlightened me a while back about the identification that officers carry, those being, I think I was referring to them as like a badge number or something, and I think you said that there's actually a number that follows them. I was wondering if maybe that could be more specific and actually, you know, not say just the required identification, which one might say, like myself, be like your badge number, but remember you said there's like an actual number that follows them. Like, could it specify that?
Yeah, so sometimes we get enamored with this whole I want your name rank, your badge number. It has a tendency to be a little bit of a Hollywood thing, quite honestly, because badge numbers don't mean much of anything. Like for instance, I'm gonna show you a prop. So here's my badge, and you can see my number, which is appropriately probably number 1, just because I'm the chief, right? But you know what? That's not the same in every organization. And quite frankly, as people leave or move up and down the organization, their numbers change. So the number that does stay with them is a number given to them when they're certified by the state. It's their DPSST number. Mine, for instance, is 23327. Every officer knows what it is by heart. I mean, even after 31 years, I can remember what it is. And so what we're thinking about is how do we, with business cards and the way we communicate, is how do we help identify officers? One of the things that I'm playing around with, and I'm going to kind of tip my hand here a little bit, and so Navasha, don't snitch me out. One of the things that I'm playing around with is getting a unique QR code for every officer that they can wear on their outer vest. And then if somebody wants to know who they are, they could just snap the QR code and it would have some identifying information on there in the event that they don't feel comfortable talking to an officer, or an officer is busy or doing something like that. It would be, especially in this environment, really, really familiar to most people with an electronic device who have been eating out or dealing with the pandemic, that QR code could be an added benefit in identifying an officer. It wouldn't replace business cards, it wouldn't replace having the conversation, but it could be an added benefit to allow for an officer to be identified.
I really like that idea. This is slightly old information though, just take this with a grain of salt. I was reading an article that said that QR codes are kind of going by the wayside, but there's a difference between those and then using like Snapchat QR codes. I guess they have their own system. So I think that needs a little bit of exploration just because not everybody has that on their devices. And also the number, I'm sorry, how many numbers are in the DPSST number?
Well, it depends on when you started. Generally, DPSST started with number 1, 100 years ago, and now newest officers, there's as many as, I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's going to be 5 numbers mostly. Mine's 23327, and I've been doing it for 31 years. Our newest officers, I think, are in the 75 or 85,000 number. But that's the important piece of that, is that it's a longer number sometimes, which is one of the deficits there, but it is a specific to that individual and that individual only, and never gets recycled. So okay. That's the piece that I'm trying to stay away from, is making sure you have like the right badge number. And if you have, if that badge number has gone through a couple of different individuals over the course of the last 5 or 10 years, then it can be frustrating for somebody to get the right name. Our intent is to get the right name of the right officer to the right individuals that want that information.
Okay, I have some additional thoughts on that, but we disappeared for a second there. Okay, so I will come back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm happy for any of your creativity around that, Bonnie. Even offline, if you want to engage me and some email or through Jeremy, we can, I'm happy to use your creativity on how we get to yes on some of these things.
That sounds really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I take the next couple of hands, I want to recognize that Commissioner Davis has joined us, and I want to give her an opportunity if she would like to do any comments, as we would normally do on commissioner comments, because there might be something you want to bring to the table.
Thank you very much. I don't have anything, but I'm glad to see everyone again.
We're glad to see you as well. All right, I'll get back to the agenda. I'm going to go to Commissioner Mogart.
So I know there's been a suggestion from the ad hoc committee to have cards, business cards that the officers can hand out. Where are we at with that? It sounds like your idea is better. I like the QR code thing, but I know that the ad hoc committee.
No,
cards.
it's, I mean, we have always had business cards. So, I mean, that's something that we've always done. And, you know, the interesting piece of this, Silver, will be where the ad hoc committee and state legislation is closely aligned. The fact that by statutorily, the state legislation is going to win the day. That tie is going to go to that base runner on state legislation. So we might be able to tweak some things, but there may be a couple instances where both those groups were thinking with the same brain. And then so that we make sure that we meet the statutory obligation, the state legislation will kind of be where we focus our attention.
Talking baseball, you know what you know where my heart is.
I do.
The other thing is, where are we at with chokeholds?
The process of dealing with the carotid restraint is exactly where I left it, which is it's not an approved technique that we will teach. It's not something that is in our use of force. I don't want to use the word continuum because that's not a word anymore, but it's not in our force options anymore. But in the event that a officer is in a position of saving their life or the life of someone else, if that ended up being something that was used, then it's not banned under that premise, much like anything else would be hitting you with a flashlight, running you over with a car. I mean, all of those horrible things that you would hope never happen, but under the right circumstances of saving your life or the life of another person, that's not technically banned. What it's banned for, essentially, if you want to use the word banned, is where carotid restraint used to lie, which was under lethal force, much like baton and taser, and the misapplication of that didn't justify lethal force. The misapplication of that resulted in people dying. And so that's been removed out of our vernacular, and it's not an option for anything other than you can justify that you were protecting your life or the life of someone else.
Yeah, and I'm clear with the carotid. I know that we're not doing that. That's great. I appreciate that. You know, my concern has always been any use of the chokehold. And like Commissioner Boggs has said, some of us have our different ideas of what we want to see done, and that's what I want to see done. I want to see it done. I just want to see it done. So
and you are very, very consistent. So
yes, I am.
Commissioner Winbrock, you are on deck.
I think Council Member Zelenka beat me to the punch
Okay.
with his hand.
Do we have any more hands? Councilor Zelenka?
Sure. So Chief, I like this table. It's a lot of stuff on here and with a lot of dates required. So I'm assuming that's when the policy needs to be in place by that date. Some of them are out as 2026, but a lot of them are 9/25/21, which is coming up. And a lot of them are beginning of next year. And then there's also like the agencies, a lot of them apply to municipal police departments. So I'm wondering about the process of how all these things get implemented and how you're going to do them and just put them in policy. Are they going to come to the police commission? Do any of them have to go to council? Or have you gotten that far about how all this stuff's going to matriculate through to become implemented?
Sure, great question. And the first thing I will tell you that in quickly perusing some of these things, it's probably easy for this commission to recognize that Eugene PD is most likely already in compliance with many of these things. Let's be real clear about where this law, where the energy around creating this legislation generated out of experiences in Portland, almost exclusively through the riots and protests and just a history in Portland. Many of the senators and representatives that sat on these committees are representing the Portland area. And so as we kind of went through some of these things, like for instance, the body cam stuff is stuff that we already have a well-developed policy around and implementation. So there's some of these things that are just not even applicable to us. We're already there. We'll double check, but we think we're already there. There's a couple of these that we're already there, with the exception of maybe making a little fine-tuning tweak to the policy, but largely the intent has already been there, or our practice has already been there. And so that'll be easy, and it'll probably be more of an advisory type thing to the police commission, saying, hey, we identified a couple of words we needed to change in a policy to meet this legislative mandate, and here's where they are. I did not see anything in here that generated really like a brand new policy that we've never even done before or heard of before. So I think what I will do is have, as Julie Smith goes through these, if we have some of these policies that have substantial rewrite or substantial language changes, that we would make those recommendations and then bring them to the police commission for their review. And then much like we do now when we're making different policy recommendations around other things that we have. But I'm hoping Julie to dig in on those. The ones that are implemented sooner rather than later, I feel fairly confident that we're already there. And there's not a lot of work to be done. And interestingly enough, the ones that are further out, which take a ton of implementation time and some financial resources and probably communications with council around how they're going to finance those things, we've already done. So really, there's a couple of these things that are kind of in that middle zone that we'll pay attention to. And Julie Smith's going to help shepherd us through that. That's going to be her first priority.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chief. Really clear. I've often said we start where a lot of people aspire to get to. And you just made that point abundantly clear. And I guess one other point about that is if it's a change and it's required by the statute to use this language, it's a courtesy review by the commission. It's not like we don't like that, we're going to change it. It's the law, and we just have to comply with that.
Yeah, there'll be a couple of things that are really prescriptive, and prescriptive on purpose that will meet the intent of what the legislative change or the new legislative law is. And so it'll be more of an advisory type thing to police commission. Right. Hey, here's the prescriptive language we need to use to add to our policy that we already have on X. And so we'll try not to waste too much of commission's time and try and really narrowly focus on those things that actually we can have some good dialogue around and some creativity around.
Good. Finally, it was good to hear that little to none of these actually will create a new policy because we're already there. So that's good to hear. That's kind of thought where we were. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, thanks for walking through this, Chief. I know that, red ink scares me, and I saw the date required, in red text for 3, and I said, oh no, and then kind of noticed that there was quite a few of them that are required almost, some of them are, past the date of no return, and some of them are coming up really quickly. I was wondering if you could just kind of give a quick overview about kind of what the enforcement looks like for non-compliance, or if you're getting into compliance, or if you're needing to report compliance. And then also, if you could talk a little bit too about maybe some of the overlay and integration of this document with the framework that I know the city manager the city attorney and the municipal judge are working on. Because to me, I think this was July 26th, the council session. The city manager showed this amazing table about the way that the ad hoc police committee, how their work's being triaged and separated in. So to me, there seems like a crosswalking and natural crosswalking that can be done, and almost an opportunity to extol the 3 layers of police oversight and how we've already met or perhaps exceeded the work that was laid out by the committee. So yeah, if you could just talk a little bit about kind of what enforcement looks like and how the state is going to be kind of doing oversight. And I know it's probably different with all the different policies, but then also if there's going to be an opportunity for crosswalking during the next presentation of the city manager, the city attorney, and the municipal judge, to be able to showcase how we're already in compliance or exceeding compliance or need to be able to meet certain things, because I know they're doing their own work for another presentation to council on what implementation of those recommendations look like from the ad hoc group.
Sure. So the one thing I will say is that the legislature is notorious for creating law without having any teeth behind it with respect to accountability. And this is another great example of creating laws or House bills and Senate bills that mandate certain things of your public safety professionals without having any thought or even putting any energy around, okay, what happens if they don't do that? What's going to be, what's going to be the accountability mechanism? So I can't in good conscience tell you that I even know what the accountability mechanism is, other than my own set of integrity, my own levels of integrity around doing this, because my state legislators have asked that we do this. So no like specific mechanism for accountability that I know of. So in the event that I'm sure that, just like Councilor Zelenko was telling us, and mentioning, is that Eugene has got a very robust accountability mechanism for anything that's not going well or not going right or around misconduct. And so in the event that there's some of these things that we're not doing, there's one of 2 things that happen through that process, maybe through the auditor's office, is A, did the chief fall down on the job and not implement this? And in that event, he's held accountable for not doing what the state law told him to do. Or B, the policy's in place and we have an officer that's not following it. And then we revert back to the normal administrative function of holding somebody accountable for not following the policy. So those are kind of some things internally that I think we can pay attention to. With respect to the connectivity with the ad hoc work, there's a little bit of difference in the sense that these are legislatively mandated. The ad hoc group work is not deeply rooted in that legislative branch of government that is mandating those things to happen. So what's happening now is those 3 employees, Judge Gill, Leah Pitcher, and the city manager, are going through the process of identifying those out of those recommendations, which one, the level, and categorizing those in levels of what is can be implemented or what can be looked at to be implemented, and then involving staff and discussion, eventually evolving staff and discussion on what implementation looks like, and a reasonable time frame to be able to do that. And then maybe in some cases, what has to be changed in our existing ordinance, or what maybe is contrary to existing, for instance, collective bargaining law. Oregon has a collective bargaining act that articulates certain things that should happen, that must happen around collective bargaining and labor law. And there may be some things in the ad hoc that run afoul of that. And so they're going through that process of kind of trying to categorize which ones fall in certain categories, to be able to start taking a deeper look at those on which ones can be implemented. Jeremy Cleversey has got, he produced a document for the city manager not too long ago around looking at the framework of the ad hoc committee and kind of trying to articulate some things that have already been accomplished and or are in process. And it's a fairly comprehensive document that has moved us down the road maybe farther than some people think around some work that we're doing. but we're hopeful that that will meet some of the intent around the ad hoc recommendations. And in other areas where we think we're doing well with regards to ad hoc recommendations, but there's a few tweaks we need to make, or maybe some accountability mechanisms or some assurances we need to put into place so that the ad hoc committee feels good about kind of the spirit and the intent of what they were trying to accomplish. We're gonna go through that work as well. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. We're in the early stages of kind of figuring out what falls in what category that we can really kind of sink our teeth into and do. Like I had mentioned to Silver, you know, my priority right now is the legislative mandates, just because I want to, with integrity, be able to tell you that we're meeting the intent of the law that's been signed by our governor. And then we'll be working on ad hoc stuff throughout this year and into next year, much in the same way of this document that you're seeing here, of what we need to do and what stakeholders we need to engage to actually meet the intent of what the ad hoc committee wanted implemented.
Thanks for that, Chief. And then in some instances, you know, I have the massive AC or AHCPP recommendation matrix that they may not be mutually exclusive. There may be the table that you've shared with us tonight, and then you go back and you would check the box, you know, for state, right, for decision-making authority, and lo and behold, the state has already made a decision, and now we're in compliance with that. But I've heard from some community members during my commissioner report that are just frustrated because they want to be able to see much more quicker progress for implementation of the recommendations. And so, yeah, I think, you know, the next presentation of the body to council on the recommendations and hearing the update, I think will help them better understand that the city is making progress and that it's not siloed, but it's happening simultaneously across the organization.
Thank you. Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, thank you, Chief. I just want to, so I'm thinking as the Civilian Review Board liaison, I zeroed in on the one of these that has to do with stuff related to CRB functions, and it looks like that's I lost it now. It's the reporting requirement. What's the number on that one? HB 3145, which, as near as I can track the history of that, is it's been amended a couple of times. The way it's encapsulated here is report officer discipline that includes an economic sanction to DPSST once discipline is final and the arbitration process is complete. And so I'm wondering if you could, so my understanding of this is that the economic sanction that would include then suspension as well as termination. So those serious, you know, the serious forms of discipline, and these are being reported and maintained in an online database at the state level. Is that correct? I see a nod. Thank you. So how, in your read, how does this change or improve what currently exists at the state and local level?
Well, a couple of thoughts there. One of the challenges that we had when we were having this discussion with our legislative group was the fact that in collective bargaining, different agencies recognize the term discipline differently. What's discipline in my agency isn't considered discipline in other agencies. In some agencies, it's not even considered quote unquote discipline with respect to collective bargaining unless it involves economic sanction. In your Eugene Police Department, discipline is categorized everything except for documented counseling or coaching and counseling. And so it really actually is very, very broad. The term discipline in the Eugene Police Department is very, very broad. So we had to kind of land on what we felt like the group was trying to accomplish. And so that was having DPSST keep a database of discipline that involved economic sanction. Now, having said that, most economic sanction investigations do go to DPSST for a cursory look around whether or not it meets criteria to come to us. And I'm on this board where we decertify officers every month, comes to us for certification review. And you can get demoted, you can get days on the beach, you can get suspended for a variety of things that don't necessarily equate to misconduct to the extent that certification should be revoked. So what this does is it captures all discipline, not just the ones that rise to that level of decertification. Now, usually termination, in almost every case, termination, if somebody's being terminated, it's generally someone that's being terminated that shouldn't. Well, let me put it this way: we terminate people that don't pass probation for a variety of reasons. It doesn't necessarily mean they should be decertified. But there's many of the terminations of existing police officers come to us for review for certification. So we know about those. We have a database of those. This just helps us have a much more comprehensive database of all our law enforcement professionals that have had economic sanction that didn't rise to the level of a full board review for revocation. And so I think it's just much more comprehensive in that respect.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. Councilor Zelenko, did you have a question?
Yeah, just kind of a comment. Just what the chief was alluding to with regard to the recommendations coming out of the ad hoc committee. What he was talking about was the framework about where to put each of these, which buckets to kind of put the recommendations into. And that's the framework that our three employees are going to bring back to us sometime in the next couple of months. And we wanted them to first bring us the framework and then figure out what goes into those buckets. So we're all on the same page, like we've already done them. They're already in process. And then kind of some metrics around easy to difficult to do, or do they require a law change? Do they require a charter change? Do they require collective bargaining changes? And then it's the city councils, once we get that matrix, it's our role to figure out the disposition of each one of those things and the timing of them. And just to be perfectly clear, not everything that the ad hoc committee said is a recommendation I'm necessarily going to adhere to. A good example is the complete redo and overturning of our oversight system is not something I'm really that interested in doing. I'm not interested in having the CRB turn into prosecutor, jury, and judge, which is what essentially that says to do. So not everything is gonna end up getting there, but we'll have robust conversations about that when we have the disposition conversation about the different recommendations out of that once they get put into the framework or buckets.
All right, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move along on the agenda. We have on this part here, which is Vice Chair Outreach Report. And I spoke with the Vice Chair, and one of the things that I wanted to see us doing was kind of reflecting back on really our mission as commissioners here. And I just want to read this briefly so you hear where I'm coming from. The Police Commission's mission recommends to the City Council, the City Manager, the Police Department, and the people the resources, preference, policies, alternatives, policies, and people's responsibility needed to achieve a safe community. The Commission strives to create a climate of mutual respect and partnership between the community and the police department that helps achieve safety, justice, and freedom from all, freedom for all the people of Eugene. The Police Commission receives reports from the Eugene Police Department, the Civilian Review Board, the Human Rights Commission, the Police Auditor, and others. The Commission also welcomes public participation. So, in many of the meetings that I have been in and over the past year, and even including today, there hasn't been a lot of participation that I've seen as far as from the public. So, does that mean that we're not charged with listening to what the public needs are? The answer is no. So when I say the next meeting and what I'm charging the vice chair to do is to encourage us as commissioners that chose to participate in this to actually do what we interviewed to do. And that means that we need each person to in some way involve themselves with whatever you talked about in the interview process that you were bringing to the table, so we all know what's happening, regardless if it's through LULAC, regardless if it's NAACP, regardless of what it is. And when we get to the outreach part, if nothing happened, that's fine. And this is not a rating, but I'm saying, how do you gauge the heartbeat of the community if we're not asking those questions to find out from the community what's going on? Doesn't matter what it is, and we're diverse. So the type of things that I would like Eugene and the people to know, number one, is who we are. So when I ask, can we supply whatever picture you feel comfortable with to show that we are diverse? This commission does not have one Black member on it. But yet, if you go to our page, you might think it is. Why? Because I'm the only one that has a picture that looks like me. We're more diverse than that. I cannot make us put pictures. That's not my charge. But all I'm saying is, if we want to show the Eugene public that we have this diverse community, show the diversity that we happen to have. That's number one. Number two, the type of things I'm talking about is this. There was a comfort level that was huge when I brokered and co-hosted a Black men professional meet and greet. We met at a certain time. 60 Black men from all different professions. The restaurant hadn't seen this many Black folk in one place in Eugene, and I don't know when. But when they found out that I was a Eugene, the look of their faces, like, what? Really? There's someone that can listen to my needs and wants? That's what makes Eugene a better place, not this code of secrecy as far as what we're doing. Things that we can do that can create a way that people participate more, people ask more questions, people help hold us more accountable is what Eugene needs. That's what I believe. So in that, we don't need a outreach tonight, but think about that as we go on and do the type of things throughout our month, throughout 2 months, whatever, that you could literally bring to this body that we can make a difference. It's not about things that are outside of our circle that we have no control. When I look at that list that came from the state, that does not excite me. What things can we do that can control and make a difference in the community that we live? I'm not interested in Portland numbers. I'm not interested in what's happening in Eugene. That's our circle. So having said that, I don't want to cut you short, Vice Chair, if you had something to bring up on the outreach program, but it's not required that you do it tonight. But I just want you to have conversations with him. One of the great things that I did with Commissioner Win V was it came to me during this time when there are a lot of hate crimes going on within the Asian community. And they reached out to me and I immediately contacted him and we met with some of the leaders, and just me showing up, there was a comfort level that people are listening to what their problems are. That's what I want us to be known for. At least under my reign, we will be known for. So work with me. I need your help. All of you are important. All of you have great ideas, but I need us to step up based off of why we are here. Now, having said that, we're going to go through our closing comments, and I'm going to begin with Commissioner Winbrock.
Yeah, it's just great to be able to see you all today. Really appreciate it. The Bias Crimes annual report and the conversation that came from that, and hearing from the chief about the OACP, OSSA implementation checklist, and really appreciate the comments from both the counselors to give some more feedback around process for the ad hoc Committee on Police Policy, because I'll take that back to the folks that I've talked to in the community organizations who are frustrated because they want to see progress happen more quickly with the implementation of the recommendations, and also be transparent too. What I heard from Councilmember Zelenka, that just because the recommendations are coming to council, that doesn't necessarily mean that all of them are going to be implemented. So yeah, and I'll think too about how I can, just take in more community feedback about police policy and make sure that folks feel like they have a seat at the table and a voice. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Mogart.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Boggs. I feel like you're giving us a pep talk, like we're like behind and we're in the locker room, and you're giving us a pep talk about what we can do better. So I want to do better. I got you, Captain. We can do it.
Thank you, sir. I love it. I love it.
So what I'd like is, I was going to be there for your event, but I have real concerns about the COVID variant. So at the time things were increasing, and I just thought I'm not gonna put myself in that position to even be concerned about it. That's just my thing. My apologies for not being there. But there are different areas where I don't reach that some of you may reach, that we're asking for you to go out and get some feedback from those different communities. And that's why we're here. That's why we're doing this in the first place, is that we can advocate for the people that we are around, for our community, the people that we know, the people that we see on the street. So thank you. Let's go, Coach.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez.
I wanted to say that somebody in the comments reminded me that I guess August was very long for me, but I also, thankfully, thanks to you, Chair Boggs, and also to Leah Pitcher, I was able to do my first kind of advising about hiring an associate auditor. So thank you for that opportunity.
Thank you for stepping up and doing that work. Thank you. Let's give her a hand right there. That's worthy of a hand. She was asked to do a task and she did the task.
I did the task.
I knew you were the right person for that.
Thank you. And I am excited to talk to the vice chair about doing some more outreach. That'll be really interesting. I also do my own outreach, generally homelessness stuff, but I could do more of the Latino outreach, which would be very interesting. And while we were talking today, I did get some ideas. So I'm excited to hopefully do something about that. Thank you. And thanks for everybody. And thanks for answering my questions, Chief, about the Autzen Stadium. I know I just got a little weird about that, but I don't know, it just kind of felt weird to me. And maybe Chair Boggs and I can talk about that a little bit more. That might be interesting. And also I'd like to talk more about the identification of the officers and just kind of using that language, because it really seemed kind of weird to me that there were a lot of things that were trying to identify officers on that list that we just saw last. And it just didn't really specify the DPSST number. So just doing that would be really great. I don't know he said he's going to be president, right? So hopefully get some sway in that. Anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Davis?
I don't really have anything, but thank you for all of your guys' input on things.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
I've been chiming in, so I'll, in the interest of time, pass.
Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Thanks. I just want to say that I'm sorry I misunderstood Silver's question. I do indeed know the name of the city manager, and I'm sorry I didn't understand what you were asking me. Other than that, I have no comment.
Okay. Dr. Garcia?
Yeah, I want to join Silver in thanking you, Dallas, for that encouragement to do better. And I know that we are all busy people. We all have not enough hours in the day, but if it helps to console yourselves, commissioners, the members of the CRB spend in this last year, like easily 2, sometimes more than 10 hours preparing for their meetings by reviewing materials. So, taking a few hours in a month to talk to members of your community you're talking to anyway about these issues that you care about, or else you wouldn't be on the commission, is a great way to spend your time. And I will attempt to do that as well.
Thank you. Officer Tester.
Nice to see you guys again and look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Just a heads up, because I don't know if everybody knows, but I am currently, sorry, my dog's a mouth breather right now. I am currently 7 months pregnant. So here coming up soon, I probably won't be able to be a part of the meetings, but just wanted to at least give you guys a heads up.
Okay, well, it looks to me, there's no hands. Are we all in motion to close this meeting? The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Yeah, have a great night.
Everyone.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks for the pep
Good night.
talk.
You got it.